thought I'd kind of just bring you through and walk through this, the report a little bit. And remember, this is a self-assessment. And one of the things that we do is we ask the community to respond to this incredibly long survey. And just the fact that you had 61 respondents, that sounds like an awfully small response, doesn't it? It's big enough to get an analysis put together, but it isn't an indication of the community being supportive of the industry enough to go through this really long survey. Most people, when they go through this survey, will stop about a third of the way and say, this is ridiculous. That alone is an indication of, I don't know, I don't want to call it sincerity, but investment in the community. So the fact that you had this many people from these groups of people, including your DMO staff, your Convention Visitors Bureau, a bunch of people who just kind of represent the community, so-called community leaders, government leaders, customers of the Convention Visitors Bureau, and other stakeholders. So that could mean vendors, for instance. It could be a lot of things. But you actually had a pretty good breakout of respondents. You can see the age group breakout. This is a good breakout because, and in fact, this is going to also be an indicator of people's interest by age group. And you look at, this kind of millennial class. I think there was a bigger group here that reported in here than I would have thought of. This is pretty representative of how we are community-wise around the state, and by traveler, by the way. So it's good to see that kind of age group breakup. The way they do this is they split the end results. They basically put it all together, and then they classify you within this grid. So if you look at people who rank up high, that's an indication of strong community engagement. People to the left understand that their community is still in this kind of developing stage. If you're down here, you have weak engagement, and the last place you want to be is over here. And I've seen communities over here. This is established destinations. Think of a place like Traverse City as a destination. You would expect them to be over here somewhere. Whether they're here or here is dependent upon what the community thinks. But if you were to look at our most successful destinations in the country for tourism, let's say Las Vegas, you would think that they would be somewhere around here. Strong community engagement and established. I actually think they're closer to here, by the way, but you would think they'd be here with a community that understands the value of tourism and that they know that they're quite established as a destination. By the way, you're not too far away from the average in America. Oh, in fact, here it is. This is the average right around the center area for destinations in the country. So to think that you're that close, the community believes that there's still some development needed, but you are kind of on this kind of right on this edge between strong community engagement and weak. I think this is actually should be a little bit higher if you look at the results. I'll show you why. But you're doing okay, long and short. What this is an indicator of is that you're like most communities in the country. You've got things to do, but you're willing to get them done. So if you look at now breaking out by these various stakeholders, you can see how this is how it worked out, and you can see this other category. This is probably general people in the community. The problem with doing this type of a report, especially with a relatively small group, 61 is not a big number, but it could be one person with a grudge or upset or super happy to really throw the report off, one or two. So it's good to see that they've all come relatively close, all these different groups in their analysis. These are the so-called stakeholders, the way their age groups break out. Interesting to see the older folks in the community are a little more positive, both on community strong engagement and feeling that the community is more developed. It's more developed for their travel interests. So that might mean people who are anglers or people who are just into sightseeing or whatever. I'm just making things up. You just don't know. But it's an indication that this community currently caters to the older crowds. Now, if you look at the younger crowds, these millennials, in both of these categories, these are the ones who are saying, listen, we got a long way to go as a community before you're there for me. Not unusual, especially for northern Michigan, Upper Peninsula communities, with the exception of a place like Marquette, university towns where they've really done a lot to cater to people and have the assets to meet their needs. For instance, Nokemenon Trail Network. A lot of younger people love mountain biking, for instance. So they've got great mountain biking networks and people know about them and know how to use them. So this is an indicator that as a community, there needs to be some work to not only make the younger people happy, but maybe to retain them here or to bring them back. As you continue to kind of go through this, so we call you the Voyagers. These are communities that certainly have a vision and community support, mostly. So if you look at this, the challenges, kind of maintaining this momentum over time to implement a growth strategy. There's a real need to prioritize choices for action and avoiding trying to be everything to everybody, because businesses do this all the time, communities do this all the time. So as a community, it's an indication that you have this great opportunity to say, what are our true assets in our community that we should develop more, promote more, make sure the world knows about them, because we can differentiate ourselves for these things, like the locks, the most obvious thing that I can think of as a traveler and somebody who loves this area. So kind of moving along and basically delivering on that brand promise. They call it establishing destination marketplace credibility. Living up to your brand promise, whatever you consider your brand promise. We generally call it the Pure Michigan Promise. A friendly place that's welcoming to all, that is developing and taking care of their resources. That's the way it is. So some interesting stuff here. Of this group, and I'm guessing it's pretty representative, everybody basically felt that your attractions and entertainment features are your number one, your most important areas to be concerned about and to develop. Interestingly enough, the performance in those areas is quite low, one of the lowest ranking in the series. So you know it's important, but you personally don't feel like you're doing enough as a community to advocate for those things. Accommodations, you feel it's second, and you're right there. So you feel like your accommodations are about where they should be. In the brand promise, you're about where you think it should be. And then when it comes to mobility and access, you're about where you think you should be. So as you look this over, and I actually encourage you to kind of look this over in detail and really look this thing over, because there's some really interesting things here. One is on your destination strengths, the things that most travel destinations will think feel are important. The sad thing is you don't overperform on any of these categories according to your perception. And these red areas are areas where you underperform by a certain degree. The yellow areas are too, but those are so small, I wouldn't worry about that. So you look at something like attractions and entertainment. This is an area that you talked about in the survey as being really important, but you feel like you're still underperforming in that area. Same thing with communication, internet, infrastructure. Everybody knows about northern Michigan and all those things. Convention and meeting facilities, air access. Especially air access, really important if you ever want to truly get serious about attracting people from around the country or international. And you feel like you're underperforming there. And there's some more insights on that as you go through the report. Anything north or right of this line, you're doing pretty well in. So interestingly enough, when it comes to attractions, you feel like you have the type of large, famous attractions that cause people to stay. Gee, no kidding, you know? You do. I mean, you have one of the most important attractions in the state. And this might be an indicator that as much as you're doing, maybe you need to do more to promote the locks, for instance. You have an assortment of authentic, unique attractions and entertainment opportunities. So, you know, you think about it, I agree with this totally. You look at all the things that you can do as somebody who just kind of likes the UP outdoor experiences. I mean, I've cross-country skied here. I've run trails here. I've gone fishing in this area. I've done the locks. I've done the casino and the entertainment and all that. So you have this really, I think, pretty diverse collection of attractions here. But I think there might be an opportunity here to kind of better collect them and curate the information about them so you can better promote it. Offers a wide diversity of parks and bike trails. I'd agree with that as well. And then you start getting into, okay, you're okay when it comes to high quality, wide-ranging arts and cultural attractions. That might be an indicator of the people who filled out the polls, but you look at, you know, your museums and such, pretty cool stuff. I personally would have rated that a little bit higher, but a lot of people will look at this and think that means art galleries. Doesn't necessarily mean that. These are all self-defined areas, by the way. Even here, when it comes to has unique and high-quality dining options, did okay. Then when it comes to these basically vibrant neighborhoods, you're underperforming. And there is, I mean, I think if you look around the community, there are some pretty sketchy areas. It's your northern Michigan, and not, you know, it's not the wealthiest of areas, so it's not unusual. But it's just another indication that whatever can be done for neighborhood development, beautification, it's necessary. Shopping, a real problem, especially downtown. You can see later on in the survey, and then, you know, the downtowns offers diverse, high-quality shopping. There it is. And I'd agree with that personally as well. Accommodations, I won't go into this in detail, but basically doing better than I thought you would in this category. But I'll also say that as a traveler, I think you have really nice accommodations here. So you can see that. And you have a couple of properties that either I wish could be ripped down or somehow reused. And you all know that too, you know.
We agree with you.
Yeah, you all.
See if you can get that done for us.
Yeah, I know. So here's the thing, is that all this stuff is so easy to talk about, isn't it? It's all about funding. It's not all about funding. It's about vision. And this is what this report will do. It basically verifies or it provides some background or some support for what people usually already know needs to be done. But if you start to look at it as a community understanding, maybe you can find that you have more support to get these things done that you might otherwise think. So when it comes to brand, tourism industry uses and leverages social media to support the brand. I was really happy to see you work with both Dave Serino and Jody as well at Gaslight. Known for being safe, clean, and secure for visitors. That's a big one. And every time there is an international or national shooting or any terrorism activity, places like Sault Ste. Marie pop up as much more inviting as a thought of a place to vacation. People want to go where they can feel safe and secure. Known as being healthy, outdoor active, that's fantastic. Established brand is simple, memorable, and market tested, that's good. Appeals to a wide range of visitors, and that's about where the positive ends. And then it starts to back up a little bit. Is known for having a lot of things to see and do. This is interesting to me, and this might be something about awareness. And it also might be because we talked about those millennials. Maybe the attractions you have here, they don't perceive as being something for them. So I think that's a good learning, because for instance, Linda and I were at Birdseye this morning. It's a coffee shop and it's an outdoor shop. If I was a millennial, I'd be there every day. If I lived here, I'd be there every day. because it kind of fits, yeah, it kind of fits their lifestyle. That's the type of thing that's really great to see that maybe there could be more promotion of. Environmentally conscious, sustainable destination, that's an interesting thing to think that the community doesn't feel that you're doing well enough there. I don't know enough about that to even say anything. But that's a big deal again with millennials. Millennials will not destroy the earth. They're going to really be an interesting group. The thing is, we were doing a lot of research on millennials early on, really concerned because there was all this thing about them kind of sitting in their parents' basement. And the thing is, a lot of them were, and they were still working, and they were starting to put money together because they're smarter than the baby boomers. They know that the parents don't mind them around, and they were saving money. Now they're spending money not on stuff, but experiences. They want to travel and see the world. And this is going to be a great group for the travel industry. They also don't want to spend a lot. They just want to enjoy a lot. So a community like Sault Ste. Marie, with the values that you offer, this combination of quality and low price, you could really take advantage of this. So and basically known for high-tech, innovative city, no. International destination. This is interesting to me. Here you are right on the border, and you don't feel like you're, an international destination. And remember, it's self-defined. So I would say you are, but that's me.
I have to agree with you on that. I just don't think some of the people that took it ever see the international travelers that go through here.
Well, the Canadians are like, they literally are your neighbors. So, yeah, that's right. They're like a local.
Some of them are relatives.
Yeah. So I think that, I would have rated this differently from my perspective, but I think your community sees Canadians from Sault, Ontario as being from the Sault, Mobility and access, rated higher than I expected, actually. But then you look at some of these things, known as a walkable city, that's really interesting that it did so well. Maybe that's because of the waterfront and all the walkability there. Access and mobility for those with disabilities. With my little knee problem, I'm becoming more and more concerned about this. Always been concerned about this because if we're to grow as a state, there are two things that are very simple for us to do that we need to be more accessible to people with all disabilities, not just wheelchair access, but people with other challenges, people who are concerned about noises and whatever, people who can't see, can't hear. We need to really get serious about this. And we're putting together some plans to help everybody do that. The other thing is, and I think there's some comment about it later, is that we need to be more pet-friendly, and we need to try to encourage our industry to be more pet-friendly, including hotels, restaurants, and such. And policy-wise, governments need to provide availability of bringing your dog into a restaurant, in my opinion. As examples. Communication, internet, you're doing okay there. When it comes to events and such, you feel like your city government is cooperative, helpful, citizens are supportive, that's a big deal. Traverse City, this would be way down because the community is just overwhelmed by events, and basically your average city resident doesn't want any more events in Traverse City. Offers year-long series of major events. You're doing okay there. Abundance of parks and outdoor experiences. Convention center, you're a little bit lower, but then I don't think a lot of people might think of like the casino, for instance, as a convention center. It's your convention center, the way I would look at it. And diverse quality facilities to host major events. It's not unusual. Northern Michigan community will kind of rate themselves lower. There's no Cobo Arena here, for instance. So nothing unusual there. Destination performance, that's kind of in the CVB world. You're doing okay there. Interesting, like when it comes to hotels performance, success in converting leads, well, not many people are going to know how to answer those things, so I wouldn't look at that too closely. Sports and rec facilities, I think you're doing okay there. As a host for major professional sports events, the university, I suppose, but I'm not familiar. Of course, the track, Maybe that's an indicator that maybe you should try to do some more with that. Convention meeting facilities, not surprised to see that kind of being a little bit lower, the things we mentioned earlier. Air access kind of surprised me that y'all rated that as low as you did. Because of the airport, I mean, seems to be okay to me. I haven't been there for a few years, but regional airport has sufficient capacity for the next 10 years. You think that's okay. When it comes to offer a variety of quality domestic air access, schedules, capacity, you feel that that's not enough. Regional airport offers true destination sense of place. I was asking Linda, I haven't been there for a long time, but has anybody been to the Pellston Airport, for instance? If you haven't, you should just drive through there sometime and just drive in and look at it. You know you're in northern Michigan when you're at the Pellston Airport. They've done some great things. Yes, they've invested in it, but you could do something like that with kind of northern Michigan decorations and such that to make you feel like you're in northern Michigan. It's a pretty cool thing. When it comes to community support and engagement, the ranking again is another problem, is that you all realize that hospitality culture is very important, but you rated yourself as low as you can as performance. Interesting to me as a visitor, I'm always feeling welcome here. Everywhere I go, friendly people. So it's interesting to me that you feel this way. Local community support is very important. Again, you kind of ranked it lower than I would have thought. Advocacy is about where it is. Industry support, you feel like you're doing better than what you think is important when it comes to community support and engagement. Got some green areas here, which means you're overperforming, which is great on advocacy, industry support. But on that hospitality culture, which we mentioned, workforce, that is not unlike any other community because people just can't find people to work right now. It's a real problem, especially up here. A place like Munising, the owners are cleaning beds. They had a restaurant shut down because they were too busy. As crazy as that sounds. The owners just said, I can't deal with this anymore, I'm closing. So we all need to continue to work on this workforce development thing. Doing okay with hospitality culture. Local community support, I think you're doing okay as well. Advocacy, you're doing very well, local level. Industry support, doing really well. That workforce area is a challenge. Regional cooperation, I think you're doing well. And that's not something that can be said everywhere. So I think most people will look at this as your economic development for the region. That's a good thing to see. Funding support, local DMO's revenue sources are stable, and DMO sufficient revenue sources. That's good to
We
see.
need more.
And that might be another one that, yeah, might be another one that most people wouldn't even know, but they still ranked it. Governance model looks good for the DMO, the CVB. Stakeholder strength and support is okay. So you look at these key takeaways, some really good stuff here. So basically it talks about how these voyagers, where you've put yourself into this category, below the industry average with destination strength, above the industry average on community support and engagement. So you feel that the destination needs to be developed, but you're all going to work together to get it done. Stakeholder groups are closely aligned in the perception of the destination. So that means you all basically agree, and the great thing is that you're relatively positive about it and you've got enough support to probably get things done. That's not the case often. Usually everybody knows it needs to be done and nobody wants to do it. So that's a good thing to see. So when it comes to opportunities, this is the one section that I would really look at in the next two slides. Shopping opportunities. I used to work for the Meijer Corporation. I love Meijer. I mean, people may not think about that as a destination shopping section or a shop, but I think it is. I think that will do more positives for you than negative, but like I said, I used to work for the company. You look at let's see, the shared economy accommodations. This is an indicator that those millennials were saying they want more Airbnb opportunities. As a CVB, you currently probably don't want that. We are looking at a statewide model which would require Airbnbs and others to, we got them to start paying and collecting state sales use tax. Governor Snyder got that through. But the next stage is, do we want to go to and actually force all the shared economy properties to also pay into the Convention Visitors Bureau, the assessments? So that's, I've asked the MACBB, that Linda's chair of, to basically come to consensus. And if the group wants us to push that forward, we'll get that done. That would mean that they'll have to pay in to help promote the community as well and not just take advantage of it. Public transportation and Wi-Fi is always a problem everywhere in northern Michigan. This whole thing about vibrant neighborhoods, easier said than done, but really important. This is an area I know you're working on, bicycle-friendly areas. That's a huge issue. The whole walkability and bicycle, the so-called cool cities approach, that they used to use that term, that's a big issue, and you don't have to spend a lot of money to be considered kind of bicycle-friendly. More access to areas where they can bike. Dining options and arts and cultural institutions. These are all the areas of opportunity. But the good thing is you have some real community support in important areas as well. So this is interesting. The one thing that Sault Ste. Marie can do, look at the economic development area. Eliminate empty storefronts, clean up downtown, empty buildings downtown, majority of empty buildings. This is the first thing that I mentioned to Linda a year ago, that if there's one thing that the community should try to work at is, if not, because it's easy to say, geez, we need to fill up those buildings. But if you can't fill them up, do something to dress them up. And I've noticed that some of your empty buildings now have like historical imagery on the windows. It's such a simple thing to do, and it makes such a big deal of difference as a visitor. I don't feel like that's an empty storefront. Maybe it is. All I see is that's an attractive part of the downtown that maybe if I'm walking through, maybe there's something I can learn or whatever, from just simply cleaning up that storefront window and doing something that's interesting. And then as you're, yeah,
CVB actually funded that.
that's a great thing. I love to see it.
From the Main Street group, they put them all up.
Well, it's a great thing. I mean, it's a small thing. I think you could also work with your art community and maybe get, blow up window clings that are maybe of their local art. They've done, like if you go to the Fisher Building in Detroit, they have big art like murals and such, sometimes just pictures of various art, paintings, whatever, and then they have a little call out of the artist explaining who they are. So now the artist has this nice little promotion to sell their art. There's something that talks about that local artist, and it's another promotion that this is an art-friendly town. Changes the perception of the visitor and of the local community. It's just simple. It doesn't.
Color too, like
Sometimes.
color things and
Yeah.
to make it.
It could. It really depends. It can be anything. But like at the Fisher Building, I was just so blown away when I first saw all these. There used to be these glass cases at the Fisher Building that used to have other stuff. Well, when they started doing this, it's now become an attraction. People will come into the Fisher Building, Detroit's biggest piece of art in itself, this beautiful building, but now they go there to see what the latest art pieces they have up. And people will use it as a wintertime attraction. It's like a museum. Under attractions and entertainment, develop the waterfront. You're going to see that a lot. Outdoor activities, develop waterfront. Dog friendliness can be something as simple as, do you have a dog park here, like a fenced-in dog park at all? Where dogs can run free?
The animal shelter has one in, the big apartment complex, Westgate Place.
So it's, that's the type of thing that communities like where I'm from, Muskegon, they now have two. They also have dog-friendly beach, which is a huge draw. People from Grand Rapids come. And my wife and I go there with our dog all the time because we're right there. It's a huge draw. And it's, not only does it draw people in, but it gives you this perception of being more of a holistic community that thinks of pets as part of the family. It's a big deal. And there's some legalities, with all that stuff, but if you were to work with check with like Muskegon or several other places that are doing these dog-free areas of parking, doesn't cost a lot, could be really good. And then hospitality culture. This is all about hospitality training, basically. Be friendlier, become more tourist friendly, improve customer service, more customer service training. So there are customer service training programs. This is something that CVBs usually take as one of their missions. It's not something that I'd recommend that the CVB tries to do on their own. I would say bring in a consultant to do hospitality training. We're looking at offering this around the state to try to help.
And I'd like to know that our EDC is doing some of that too, and then we sponsor it, so I mean, if there's a partnership happening.
Yeah. And I want to help there as well, so I'm still looking at this. So certain issues the local destination should specifically address. Attracting a year-long attraction, again, easier said than done. You already have a couple. And Great Wolf Lodge is mentioned as a suggestion. That's just one of those dream things. But policy-wise, if you ever do get a development of some sort like this, do what you can to help the community bring that about. Beautification, like the little pocket park you now have with the beautiful sculpture down at the corner of Ashman and I forget the other road. That is fantastic. What a difference that's made, I think, from my perception of the town. So these types of things, if you do have empty, like in a downtown, a lot of times there's a fire or whatever, place like Charlevoix, for instance, they had a big fire. They ended up building back up. But they were thinking about pocket parking that area. I've seen it done in other communities like in Alpena. And not only did they put a little pocket park, but they commissioned a mural to be up there. It's now an attraction. Community development at the MEDC, they're funding murals at my request. And so there are ways to try to get murals funded, and I'm happy to hook you up with the right people. We have crowdsourcing funding opportunities as well for those types of projects. So we'll fund half of the crowdsourcing. You put the project together, you make sure it's something that can be managed, we'll help you get the money. Again, more dog-friendly, additional products like the paddleboarding thing, the stand-up paddling and all that, that's all good stuff. On regional collaboration, interesting, creative teaming with threats like Airbnb. So, Airbnb and those sharing economy, it's just their new reality. It's the new disruptors in the hotel world. They're going to be here. So have a policy. Do you have a short-term rental committee at the city level? Does anybody know? I'd recommend getting one set up because they will be here. And you want to have policies in place to make sure that you're taking advantage of sharing economy and not being taken advantage of. So for instance, in Grand Haven where I live, I've attended as many short-term rental committees as I could. And my view on all this changed dramatically by going to those meetings, because I'm a big believer in private property rights. But the thing is, we have zoning rules for a reason. And after having gone through these committees, I really became an advocate for proper policy by local community. So you decide how many shared economy accommodations you're going to allow in a neighborhood. Grand Haven, we had full neighborhoods that were being built or turned into Airbnbs that will ruin your schools and your community. And you'll have basically half of the year people there, half of the year nobody there. So Grand Haven realized that. They established a rule where you can have X amount in a neighborhood, first come, first serve. They all pay a certain fee, a couple $100 a year, whatever it is, so that now the city was able to hire a part-time inspector so they can make sure there's fire, not suppression, but fire warning, that they're living up to community neighborhood standards, like there are not a dozen cars in the parking lot, that they're not just partying all night. So it just makes sense. I really recommend you get to the city and ask them to start looking at that.
He's sitting right here.
Yeah. So it's
Mayor Pro Tem.
yeah. So it's just something, and so if you want like some connections with people, for instance, Pat McGinnis, the city manager in Grand Haven, he'd be glad to share insights, and you want to get ahead of it. So some good stuff there. And the whole thing, work with property owners to upgrade the look of the city. I know, easier said than done. You can't do it all by policy, but whatever you can do. So then the last couple things, this company always asks for the most iconic image. There's a reason for that. What people always think of as the most iconic image is your most promotable asset, 100% of the time. So when I was in Muskegon, I actually went through this just to see how the survey was. And I thought, what did I think? And I thought of Pierre Marquette Park, one of the biggest city publicly accessible parks. It's right on Lake Michigan, just south of Muskegon State Park. And I thought, when I think of Muskegon, that's what I think of, because I grew up there. It turned out every single one of the people in that room that filled out that survey today, every single one mentioned the lake. That's how iconic that is. And I bet almost everybody mentioned the locks as well.
I would have thought it was Linda Hope.
Yeah. Well, that too. Yeah, that too. So that's an indication that this is your most promotable asset. You should look at that and maybe even do more. And then the top 3 attractions, the locks, the casino, Valley Camp. I love them all, and I agree. Not that that matters. So that's that report. I just think the interesting thing is, this is your self-perception of this thing.
We did this. You were part of that.
So the funny thing is, we always hire all these consultants to tell us what we can do, and if they're the right consultants, almost always they tell us what we already know.